Lovely. I think we can see everyone well. Thank you, everyone, for attending what we call Next Generation Homeownership, a Toronto guide for first-time buyers in the city of Toronto. My name is Gabriele Battista. I am the owner and realtor at Homes into Reality. This is a webinar that I'm really proud to be doing over the last 3 years, and we've done it almost on a monthly basis. Some months we've done it more than once, just because there's so many people who want to just get refreshed on the content and really understand what their process is as a first-time buyer. So that was what we're going to be talking about today. A couple small housekeeping items. You'll notice on your screen, you of course have the lovely content on this side over here. This side over here. Below me is a link to book a call with me whenever you'd like and to just learn a little bit about what we do. But the most important thing is a little bit more below is a Q&A section. All questions will be confidential and will come directly to me. I'm going to do my best to answer those questions throughout the webinar. If I think that they're relevant to the content we are talking about, I will answer them on the spot. If I think there's something that should be left to the very end, we do have about 15 minutes at the very end after 45 minutes of conversation to go over any questions. I talk, the real estate market in general. I talk people's particular situation. I go off the rails of whatever questions you want to ask as a first-time buyer. So feel free to leave questions in the Q&A when that comes up, and I will answer them either during the webinar or at the very end. So I appreciate all that. Thank you for everyone joining. This looks like there's tons of people on today. So we're going to get started. I think this is, yeah, this should work. Amazing. So, what are we going to cover today? On the very high level, it'll be the buying process, breaking that down into 8 simple steps. We're going to talk about creating a purchase budget. So, if you are to buy a home today, how much money do you need? Do you need down payment, closing costs, an emergency fund? We're going to break it down to many people's particular situations. We're going to talk about first-time home buyer incentives. What do you guys get as a first-time buyer that other people don't? And there's some new exciting stuff that people have recently brought up with the new HST rebate on new construction. So we're going to talk everything about incentives. And then we're going to talk about the real estate market as well. We're going to break down market numbers, my opinions on things, whether you should be renting or buying. So we go through into some pretty deep detail. And then lastly, building your team for success and what next steps look like. If you were to say, Gabe, I want to buy a home today, what type of stuff are you looking for to complete? To get to the next step to eventually purchase your next home. For the people just joining us, at the very bottom of our screen is our Q&A section. As questions come up, please feel free to ask them as we go along. I'll either answer them throughout the webinar if they're relevant, or at the very end once all the content is finished after about 45 minutes. Again, I want to keep it as interactive as possible, so feel free to chat along as we see. Again, no one will see your Q&A questions. I will see them. So I will answer them on the spot as I see fit. So who am I? My 1 minute story. Again, my name is Gabriele Battista. I'm the person who's always on the webinars, and I'm a real estate agent in the city of Toronto, and I've always branded behind Homes into Reality. The idea is we really want to get young people into home ownership, and a lot of people say it's impossible, it's very difficult, it's not a reality for me. And the awesome thing that we've been able to do over the last 3 years is get a lot of people into their very first homes. And it really all starts with education like this. And then, of course, for more purposeful follow up and help and support to getting them to what their first home looks like. We've been doing this webinar for 3 years. We've also had the opportunity to do a couple in-person events as well. So I'm glad that you guys are a part of it. So we're going to start with the home buying process itself, which is 8 simple steps. Introduction to your real estate agent, getting pre-approved, starting to see properties, putting offers in on homes, deposit on the winning offer, waiving conditions, closing paperwork, and of course, at the very end, welcome home. So breaking it down a little bit more in detail, I will talk about how I tend to do things, especially my process behind clients is first-time buyer heavy. I do work with a ton of other clients, whether they're sellers, move-up buyers, but my process with first-time buyers is very particular because I find it's very productive. It works over the years. Number one is introducing your real estate agent. Now, this will I call is the research and education phase. At the end of the day, there are 70,000 real estate agents out there in the city of Toronto. There's a ton. And what I would tell you is find the right person who's going to help you with your particular home goals. Everyone is going to look for something a little bit different. So finding someone who's the right fit and is willing to walk you through a very stressful time in buying the most expensive asset you're likely ever going to purchase. Can be a daunting one. So finding the right person is really important. But during the stage, you want to be educated and do research on this type of stuff. Similar to why you guys are on a webinar like this today, is to do research to really understand what you guys need and discuss criteria, discuss timelines, and make sure that we have a good budget set in place. We may be doing this a year ahead of the purchase, or it could be today. Um, Number two is getting pre-approved, and this is an important step in the home buying process. The main reason being is it's your first step in the mortgage process, and most people are going to be getting a mortgage on their first home. And I find most questions are associated with the mortgage process. It is something that is confusing to a lot of people, which is why we have a lot of great mortgage partners to help people along the way. So when you get pre-approved, you're holding an interest rate for 90 to 120 days. With that, you are shopping with confidence and provides clarity with your search. So if you get pre-approval, you know more or less the purchase price we're going to be looking at with the interest rate, what those associated payments are going to be for 120 days, 4 months. And when you're searching for a home, which we're going to get to, it can take some time. So having security in that and knowing what a proper budget is quite important. Then we get into seeing properties, and that is for a lot of people the most fun, especially for the very first time when you're going to go out to see properties. And I always recommend you want to see properties in different locations and with different criteria. A lot of people will come to me saying that they have a 900K budget based off of pre-approval, but they're very open in Toronto. So let's say a budget like that, you can be looking at townhouses, you can be looking at condo apartments, it can be some entry-level freehold property as well. So with that, you want to kind of balance location and criteria and really narrow down that search with constant feedback. We might start seeing by 8 properties for the very first time, and then with time, we might start to see 2 properties because we understand what that end goal looks like. The idea really is you want to get quantity into quality. The average home search takes about 10 weeks. That is according to KW stats that it actually stayed very consistent over the years. Even with technology and improvements in the home buying process, it still more or less can take about 10 weeks. Now, let's say we find a property we really love and we want to consider putting an offer on a home. We did this earlier this week with the client. Once we find a property we love, we're then going to review pricing comparables, especially now where list prices are not always the most honest price point out there. You a lot of times see different marketing strategies where people list lower with the intention to sell for higher. We want to review pricing comparables to make sure we understand what the market value of a home is. So together on a similar to a Zoom call like this, we're going to go through what similar properties have sold. We're going to determine the terms and conditions. We're going to get a formal written offer on paper. And then at that point, once we submit that offer, we're going to wait seller feedback and we may negotiate back and forth. It can last anywhere between hours and into days. I have an active deal right now going on that we've been going back and forth for about 2 days. And that's just because of the circumstance. And it can be so different for everybody. But when I find when it comes to review pricing comparables, this is the most important step because you want to get an idea of what my professional opinion is on a property based off number one, comparables, and number two, market stats that we track pretty deeply. I do see a couple great questions in the Q&A chat. A lot of this stuff we're going to push to the very end at the Q&A just because I want to make sure that we go through all the content in good time. And then I will stay as long as you like at the very end. Unless the questions are relating to content as well, I will push them to the very end of the webinar. But I'm happy I see a couple good questions that I'm happy to answer once we get to the end. Next one is the deposit and the winning offer. So let's say we put an offer on a home, we are able to negotiate a mutually agreed upon price between buyer and seller. We then have the obligation as a buyer to deposit that, not deposit, to bring the deposit over through a bank draft. Typically, a deposit is anywhere between 5 to 10% of the purchase price within 1 business day of acceptance. So if today we're accepting an offer, we have until tomorrow to bring that deposit into a bank to have it deposited into a trust account. One question I got really quickly in the chat relating to this is there a difference between a deposit and a down payment? It's similar to like, is a finger or a thumb by a thumbs on a finger, in the sense that your deposit makes up your down payment. So for example, let's say you're putting 20% down and your deposit is 5%. That 5% will be going towards your 20%. you are legally required to bring the deposit as the contract is signed under seal. The next question, the next part is waiving conditions. A lot of times in offers, we're including multiple conditions in our offer. That could be anywhere between a home inspection, a finance condition, or a lawyer review. These are the three main ones, but there can be some other ones as well. If for some reason we go through some of these conditions, but we find out that the home inspection is not satisfactory to what we're looking for, or the lawyer flags something and we have to back out of the deal, we then get our full deposit back in full. It's important to note that we must act in good faith. So we can't have a home inspection condition, but then back out because of financing. Lastly, we have closing paperwork, and this is the final paperwork that is sent to the lawyer and mortgage broker. Once money is transferred into the trust account, we can get ready to start closing. And because of course you cannot close on the property until all the money's in there. The mortgage broker will send the mortgage amount to the trust account. You will send your down payment to the trust account along with closing costs. And you can expect to sign documents a few days prior to closing on a property. Fun fact, I always try to close on a Thursday. Why is that? If God forbid something went wrong, you have the next day on Friday to then make sure the property closes in time before the weekend. Let's say you had a closing date on a Friday and something happened, there was a delay in something, we're then waiting until Monday to close. And for a lot of people, it's the most stressful 3 days they're going to have in their life. So I usually keep it on Thursdays. And of course, this is the process that I like to break down as simple as possible, but I have the luxury to say has worked a ton with a lot of my clients. And we have, I think we're at 128 five-star reviews with Homes into Reality. These are all real clients that we've worked with. And if this is something that you'd want to eventually explore, you of course can scan the QR code and get booked in to chat a little bit about your particular home search and how this process can help you. We're going to talk more about that in a little bit, but I do want to talk more about budget and things you can do ahead of time before buying a property. One thing you're going to find through this conversation, I called a lot of you guys prior to the webinar, was where are you in your home journey? And the good thing is creating a proper budget is something you can do whether you're 2 years away from your first home or 2 days. Like if you're ready to buy something tomorrow, creating a proper budget is extremely valuable. So we're going to use this young, handsome man over here as an example. This is Gabe. Gabe wants to buy his first home, and when we use him to create a budget, he has no idea where to start. And many of you on the call may think the same thing. Many of you maybe will have a budget already, but Gabe wants to buy a condo for $620,000. However, he needs to determine how much total savings he needs to purchase that condo. He's also very smart, handsome, and runs a very successful webinar. Thank you very much. With that being said, the big purpose we're going to talk about here, actually, we're going to go back for a second, is what's the total amount of money in my bank account that I'm going to need to buy this home? That's the key thing we're trying to determine with this budget. And for people who are aggressively saving, this is going to be helpful to understand what we should be budgeting for. Now, two things that do not cost you money. Number one is, again, it's a pre-approval. This is something that you can get either through a bank or a mortgage broker. With that being said, it's not going to cost you a dime to get a pre-approval. I have heard of situations where there are some unethical people out there that will charge you for a pre-approval. I can assure you, none of my partners and the good mortgage brokers will not be doing that. The idea is it just holds you to a lender, or it holds you to a rate, and it gives you comfort that you can shop with confidence. One question I very commonly get is, should I go to a bank or a mortgage lender? And the best way that I explain this is, let's say you bank with TD, and you go to the TD teller and you ask, I want to get a mortgage. They're going to give you the rates that TD is currently offering, but you don't know what the rates at Scotiabank are, RBC, CIBC, all the other big banks and lenders. And what TD is offering might be more expensive than what Scotiabank is offering. And the key thing is with a mortgage broker, they are going to shop around on your behalf to make sure you're getting the best bang for your buck on the mortgage side. And again, it won't cost you a dime to do so, and you have a good professional on your side negotiating on your behalf. Realtor commissions. For any property that is listed on the MLS and is cooperating with real estate agents, you can have confidence that you will not incur any cost for Homes into Reality services. I'm speaking on my behalf on what I do. I can't speak for all real estate agents, but I can tell you the way that I work is I'm being paid through the proceeds of the sale, which is coming out of the seller's pockets. And I'm happy to say that I've never, of my 8 years in the business, have charged anyone for realtor fees. It's just not something that I do. I'm paid for what the seller is paying me. but that is not a cost that you have to consider when it comes to these two options. So looking at our proper budget, I break it down to three simple areas. We do a down payment, we do a closing cost, and we do an emergency fund. And we're going to break that down for your situation here. Down payments, there have been some recent changes to how down payments work, but the general idea to consider is if you're buying something that's less than $500,000, you're looking at a 5% down payment. So in this situation, $495,000 condo times 5%, you're at $24,750. If you are anything above 500,000 up to just under 1.5, it works as a sliding scale. You can your minimum down payment would then be 5% of the first 500,000, so it would be 25,000 plus 10% of the balance of that. So in this example, we have $830,000. With that, the first 500,000 is at 5%, therefore it's 25,000 plus the next 330,000, which is the balance of after 830 minus 500, is at 10%. So that would leave us with $33,000 plus $25,000 equals $58,000. And that equation goes all the way up to just under $1.5 million. So even for $1 million home, you're looking at $25,000 plus $50,000, you're looking at $75,000 for a minimum down payment. Of course, the higher of a price point, it does change a little bit as well. Once you get to $1.5 million, is a 20% down payment is mandatory. Now, you can imagine that the down payment for a property that is 1.4999 million, and then you go a dollar over to 1.5 million, the down payment dramatically increases. Now, the good thing for all the people in this webinar today is we likely are not looking at many first-time buyer homes above 1.5 million. I've done it a couple times. Most of the time, we're looking at something under 1.5 million. So we're using most of the time the sliding scale below here. And the question oftentimes is, should I put 20% down? Is that worth it to me? What can I put down? What's the best down payment? And I'm going to tell you my honest thoughts. And what I tell everyone when I have this conversation is it depends for everybody. The example we're going to give here is for a $620,000 condo, you could put the minimum down payment of about 6%. And at 6%, we're looking at the associated monthly payment of $3,137. But you can also go all the way down to 20% if you've saved aggressively and you want to, be at that amount. The reason why a lot of people aim for 20% is because the CMHC insurance that I'm circling over here, that goes away once you get to 20%. This is not money you need up front, the CMHC insurance, but it does get added onto your mortgage. So you can imagine over, let's say, 30 years, 25 years of a mortgage, this will, be money you're financing. So a lot of people, if they can get to 20%, it's lovely to do, and I recommend it. With that being said, some people may balance the idea of, do I want to save some money, keep some money, let's say in the stock market, be diversified where you're still not draining all your investments. That's the way I look at it is you want to compare your mortgage payment to the amount of money you're putting down and do a cost analysis on what is it worth to you. So in this situation, it is 5 to 20% of the purchase price. And then, of course, you determine your monthly payment with the different down payments. Now, when we talk about land transfer tax, we're talking about closing costs. And this by far is going to be the most expensive of the bunch. So it'll make up the majority of our equation. How this works, it is this equation over here. I won't explain it fully, but it is a one-time fee paid through your lawyer to the Ontario and municipal government. The best way to describe this is if you currently have if you're in Toronto, you pay 2 land transfer taxes. If you're outside of Toronto, but in Ontario, you pay 1. The math, how this works for a $620,000 condo, for the first $55K, you're paying 0.5. Next $195, you're paying 1%, so on and so forth until you get to the 2% number. Again, most people are not paying over $2 million for the next home. And then for this $620,000 condo, you're paying $8,875 to Toronto and $8,875 to Ontario. So a total land transfer tax of $620,000 would be $17,750. And this is money that you will pay upon closing and essentially is the tax for buying a property. Now, there is good news. As a first-time buyer, you do qualify for a rebate. So that in the exact situation we just talked about, because you live in Toronto, or that property is in the Toronto postal code, you will get a total rebate of $8,475. And that amount of money is going to be taken off the top. So you're never going to have to see that money of $8,475. I know some rebates work where you have to request for it back. This does not work in that case. This will just be money taken off the top. So you will then only owe $9,275. This is only for first-time buyers like yourselves. And this, frankly, is the hardest money that you're going to save from the government perspective. You're probably going to find. Well, and again, that is something that is hard to understand because you're never going to see that money, but it is a decent chunk of change taken off that land transfer tax. And for someone who, like myself, who works with some move-up buyers as well, you find that that amount of money is really helpful when they do want to make that move again. Let's say you're outside of Toronto. Let's say you're in Ottawa. You will then only pay one land transfer tax, but you will only get a rebate up to $4,000. So in this case, they have a total land transfer tax of $14,275, but with a rebate of $4,000 being in Ontario, they get $10,275 they owe to the lawyer upon closing. So it is a bit of a middle ground. I'm in Toronto, I pay 2 land transfer taxes, but I get double the rebate, or a little bit more than double. And then outside of it, we get a little bit less of a rebate, but only pay 1 land transfer tax. One thing to note, one question I have in the Q&A chat right now is, what are the boundaries for Toronto? It's a great question. I believe that there's a couple ways I typically look at it. Geographically, I look at Steeles as your Toronto boundary. I look at your east boundary being Scarborough, and in your west boundary being before Mississauga number 1, but the 427 is what you're looking at. Anything with an M postal code is considered Toronto, so that's how I typically look at it. But yeah, that's the way you look at it, is those boundaries, and then I look at postal code as well. Other closing expenses to consider: lawyer fees plus disbursements. Lawyers will charge you a fee to close a transaction. They will also transfer any funds and notify city records that title ownership has been changed, and any costs the lawyers have to incur, it will be charged back to you. My easiest example is if the lawyer needs to photocopy a piece of paper. I know it sounds dumb, but the photocopy will be charged back to you. A more practical example will be a lawyer may have to incur some expenses like obtaining title insurance, and which we talk about below, and then doing things like doing a title search. And a title search basically goes through all the back end of a property, make sure there's no issues in the title of the property. That's paid for by you guys through disbursements. Okay, so now we have 2 to 3% of our purchase price. That tends to be the rough math that ends up being worked out with the closing costs. The main things to consider: land transfer tax and lawyer fees. I do have a calculator. I do show clients online. I can show you guys in a little bit at the Q&A section. I think it's quite helpful, but helps us kind of go through closing costs a bit more in detail. And now lastly, your emergency fund. Now this is something that I get a little bit of flack for, because I understand Toronto is a really unaffordable place to live. I'm not denying that. So when people say I got to save even more money to buy a home, what I tell them is, this is my recommendation. Do you have to listen to me? No. You guys are all adults and you're going to pay for your own property. But I find this is a really good buffer that I recommend clients that have, because the moment they buy their property and they move in, they need some money. You got to have money for moving expenses, money for furniture. You have to consider, like the way I look at it, our lovely example of Gabe with the $620,000 condo, he has to purchase, number one, furniture and all this stuff, but he's self-employed as a real estate agent where he's not getting paid the same amount of money every single month. So you want a cushion of money in your account to pay for certain expenses. And I would recommend that anyone who's self-employed, anyone who's an independent contractor who has fluctuations in income, to consider having an emergency fund to help keep you afloat. And my example is just add up all of your mortgage payments, condo fees, groceries, utilities, car expenses, all that fun stuff that you have to spend on a month-to-month basis, times it by 3 to 6 months, that's your emergency fund. So the goal that we talked about before is 3 to 6 months of living expenses. So that's $18,000 for this person's situation for 4 months expenses. He has a lot of his own furniture, and he got his buddies to help him move for free. This person is also putting a 20% down payment for $124,000, and associated with that is a $3,600 mortgage and condo fees and taxes. Closing costs are $9,275. Lawyer fees of $2,000 and a buffer of $1,000. I always like to have a buffer because there might be a home inspection you need to do. You might have to pay for some insurance up front. Whatever it is, you want to have a little bit of a buffer in your budget. And then for this particular budget, we're looking at $154,000. And you might tell me, Gabe, that's a ton of money. In my situation, I cannot save that amount of money in the amount of time I want to. And I totally get it because it is a very, large chunk of change. And that's why I'm going to remind you that was a 20% down payment. And when people ask me, what's the best down payment? I can't answer that question because it's so situational. And for some people, a minimum down payment is just as appealing because they can have extra money saved up, or they're not yet ready. They want to buy a house really badly and they don't have the extra money for a larger down payment, but they know it's a long-term home where they're willing to suck up some of the insurance premium costs. So that same example from 154,000, we're now down to 72,000 with slightly higher closing costs because there are some mortgage insurance costs associated, with a minimum down payment dramatically lower but a higher monthly payment, and then a larger emergency fund because your not your down payment, your monthly payment's more expensive, have more money saved up with a higher emergency fund. So I always ask people, this is obviously for one particular person. Do you want to create your own budget? The great news is you can. We've been able to create a tool at homesintoreality.ca where you can make your brand own, like your own personalized budget. And it looks exactly like this, where you can put more or less the property price that you want to purchase for a condo, a townhouse, and detached home, whatever it is. And you can mess around with these numbers. It tells you what the minimum is expected. And it also tells you with your current savings and the amount of money you're going to save on a monthly basis, how long will it take you to get to that goal? For some people, it's a few months. For some people, it's a few years. But that's why it's very situational, and it's good to mess around with these tools to make sure you have opportunity to learn these things. So this is a tool that I use a ton with clients. Whenever I get on calls with people, I will look at this tool and I will do a monthly budget for them. And you even can print and download a PDF, which you can again print out and fill out for yourself too. So I encourage you to use that tool. And this budget story, the reason why I focus so much on it is because I've had tons of success stories around it. We had a client last year who is to this day one of my favorite and best clients. I don't pick favorites, but they're a lovely family who've always shown me some kind words. They booked a webinar call. They attended the webinar in February of last year. They booked a call for the next day, which again, you can do so through this QR code. We then got them pre-approved and we started shopping with a different budget in mind, number one, and a better neighborhood and concept of what they're looking for. And they were able to avoid buying a really, bad townhouse. And they bought something that was closer to what they wanted. It was a semi that was a much larger family home that they wanted. And then, of course, we would negotiate $20K off the list price with conditions and multiple offers. And we secured a family home they'd love forever. And this is a real life situation. And with this one, there's other ones. There's actually dozens of other ones as well. So I would love for you guys to be one of those situations as well. And again, you can do so by scanning the QR code below me. And we're happy to get you started on your home search. So first-time buyer incentives. We talked about one really quickly, the land transfer tax credit. We're not going to talk a ton about this unless there's questions about it, just because we're 30 minutes in. I want to make sure we get through everything. The first-time home buyer tax credit is very simple. Once you buy your home, just let your accountant know, hey, I bought my first home, put me down for the tax credit, and you're going to get $1,500, up to $1,500 back in a tax credit, which is a lot because $1,500 can pay for a lot. You can probably pay for the accountant that does your taxes. The next one is the RRSP home buyer plan. If you have money in your RSPs but you cannot access them, that is a pretty common complaint of the RRSP home buyer plan. You can now withdraw up to $60,000 from your RSPs to go towards the purchase of your first home. You will need to repay that amount back to your RSPs over the next 15 years. So if you want short-term accessibility and liquidity, if you are dedicated on buying your first home, this is the way to do so. And then your first home savings account. This is something that you can use. Well, honestly, if you're going to take one thing from this webinar today, open up a first home savings account today, because there's contribution room that will carry forward if you open it today. You can contribute up to $8,000 towards the account every year, with a max lifetime contribution limit of $40,000. What I look at this is it's a saving vehicle that is a hybrid of an RSP and a TFSA, where similar to an RSP, let's say you made $88,000 and you contributed $8,000 to your first home savings account. Your taxable income is now going to be $80,000. So you are not going to pay income tax on that $8,000. And if your income's in the $80,000 range, you probably have about a 35% tax bracket if I'm going to guess. So that's 35% of that $8,000 that you are saving. And that's money you're not paying towards income taxes. And the other benefit to it is you can buy appreciating assets like stocks, GICs, bonds. I would say relatively safe things, but you can have things that are on the upside. Once you take this money out of the account, it comes out tax-free. So it's not free money per se, but there are tax advantages you can take advantage of to lower the taxable income you have. And instead of paying that money to the government, use that money towards saving a bit more aggressively. Giving yourself a buffer, giving yourself an emergency fund. Those are tools you can use. And I talk with that, but I also want to get into some of the financial planning behind it too. And this is an example, and this will differ for everybody, but I want to give you at least an idea of how you should be looking at these things. If you are to, over 3 years, to contribute $24,000 to your first home savings account, which is $8,000 per year, and over 3 years also contribute about $11,000, $12,000 into your RSPs, especially if your employer is matching these contributions, you should be using the home buyer plan, because that essentially is free money because your employer is supporting you on that. Either way, over 3 years, let's say you're a couple, one person from each couple is over 3 years. So the math in my head, $8,000 plus, you're saving about $20,000 a year. And $20,000 a year. And over 3 years, you're saving $60,000, which, you know what, 3 years is a very long time. And this hopefully is an attainable goal. But two people together, so 59,000 plus 59,000, you're at $118,000, which is just under $120,000, which I'll show you for an entry-level condo is almost a 20% down payment. Now you may be saying, Gabe, it's easier said than done. You could just save $20,000. That seems unrealistic. Okay, I will take it one step further. If you use these plans properly, and again, we'll use similar numbers where this person's making $150,000, this person's making $120,000, and every single year you are contributing just about $20,000. You will, in tax savings, get $8,537,000 just in tax savings alone. Let me explain that. So because you get the deductions from your RSPs, you get the deductions in your first home savings account, you are paying $8,537 less tax. Now this is according to your tax bracket, but you are paying less tax every single year. And over a 3-year span, that's $25,000 that you have saved additionally by using these resources. $25,000 can give you almost a minimum down payment. So that buffer will likely pay for your closing costs and get you ahead of the game. So it's not about saying it's really expensive, I can't get there, I have to save more aggressively. And frankly, you don't have to use these numbers. You can use a smaller version of these numbers or even a larger version of these numbers. That's totally up to your situation and what's going on with you. But what I'm going to emphasize is use these tools to take advantage of the tax deductions and save that money additionally. So a couple in 3 years with these incomes are saving almost, doing math in my head, $46,000. That is more than a minimum down payment on entry-level condo, and it covers more than enough for your closing costs as well. Again, I just circled that. It will cover not only will you have saved this money, so $118,000, but you also have this extra buffer as well. Other advantages you get as first-time buyers is you do get access to a 30-year amortization mortgage. One thing with this that I always like to talk to people about is the amount of interest you're going to pay on a 30-year mortgage versus a 25-year mortgage is dramatically more. But I still recommend to get a 30-year mortgage. Why is that? When you're doing a budget and you want to make sure you have the most realistic budget possible, you want to keep those monthly payments as low as possible because you're dealing with paychecks and you're like, okay, how much money in my paycheck's going to come out to go towards the mortgage? It is in your best interest to pay as little money as possible on these mortgage payments. So a 25-year mortgage versus a 30-year mortgage with these interest rates and such is a $300 difference. Now you may say again, oh my God, I'm going to pay so much interest by having a 30-year mortgage versus 25. There's no reason why you cannot pay your mortgage or the minimum payment on your mortgage, but if you save money $300 quicker, you can put down extra mortgage payment every few months or once a year prepay your mortgage up to 15%, which would just go towards the principal. When you're paying your mortgage, especially during the beginning, a big chunk of it goes towards the interest of the loan and some of it goes towards the principal. When you're putting down, let's say $321 a month and as an extra payment, that's going directly towards the principal and none of it towards the interest. So in my opinion, it's more beneficial to take the longer mortgage and be more aggressive with paying down that expense. Now, we're going to talk about the market. I can get carried away with this stuff. I'm going to acknowledge because there's a lot to talk about. I know there's questions that people have about this type of stuff, and there's a good question I have from someone in the beginning. Thank you for that question regarding the market. We're going to talk about that shortly. Um, we're going to start with the basics. So over the last 3 years, we've been dealing with a high inventory market. If you look over here, if you follow my cursor, which is somewhere here, it is. My cursor, since the late 2023, we saw a big jump up in listings on the market. Listings are just homes on the market that are listed for sale. And then we saw a jump up in 2023, and then 2024, it really took off. And since then, 2025, we've had a high inventory market. And 2026 so far, we're seeing a similar sign. Some signs that it might be a little bit lower than last year. With that being said, we have a ton of supply in the market. And why do I bring that up? Real estate market's a supply and demand game. It really is. If there's more supply than there is demand, prices have gone down. If there's more demand than there is supply, prices will go up. And if you look over here, we've been dealing with low demand over the last 4 years. And in my opinion, the way I see real estate prices right now, actually, yeah, I'll show here. The way I see real estate prices right now, we've been coming down over the last few years. We're down about 8% on detached homes and condos from January and a little bit different for February. So we are seeing some dramatic drops in price point. It's very similar to the 90s where we saw prices slowly grind downwards and frankly, for many years stayed flat. But this is the first year after many years of just overall prices weren't really moving where they've come down. We don't yet know what we're going to see in this year. But with that being said, so far the signs have been that prices have gone up to a very similar level to what happened in 2025. If you notice here, all prices went up in February. And you might say, oh my God, the prices are going up. That means the market's going to take off. Not necessarily. It just means that spring's doing its thing where better quality listings are coming onto the market and prices organically will go up. But we still are lower year over year. So a lot of my clients who are purchasing right now are reaping benefits of lower prices compared to last year. Again, people always ask me, well, what do I see the future of real estate prices? The best way for me to say it is until we see this supply come back down or demand go up dramatically, we're likely going to see flat real estate prices or slowly declining real estate prices is my best interest or my best guess. And now, really quickly, we also saw condo prices go up. If you want to compare the rent versus buying numbers, I track this on a monthly basis, and I'll show you my spreadsheet afterwards. I'm pretty proud of that stuff. Your two-bedroom condos have done a little bit better than, let's say, your one-bedroom condos because a two-bedroom condo is just more practical. And then in a market right now where really small condos are suffering, two bedrooms have been a bit more advantageous for some people. Now, I'm going to get into why I think a first-time buyer in some shoes, it makes sense to buy a home no matter what market it is. Um, maybe I get to this. I'll do this slide first. Some people on this call should be renting, and there's nothing wrong with that. I'll go through why. You should be renting if you're looking at real estate as a 1 to 2 year timeline. If your job or income is not yet stable, you're still building up your down payment and your emergency funds, and you're pushing yourself uncomfortably tight financially. Or if you want flexibility to move neighborhoods or cities, or you're unsure what type of home you want. The summary of that is if you think you're going to buy a home today and sell it in a year or 2 years, you should not be buying in this market. I promise you, you should not be buying because the cost of purchasing is number one, very high. There's closing costs to consider, and the cost of selling is also very high. But if you are looking to stay put for 3+ years, your income is stable and predictable. You have down payment plus closing costs saved, your monthly costs as an owner fit your budget comfortably, and you want stability and control over your living space, and you're ready to commit long-term to one location, it is a great market for you to buy. We'll get back to this graph over here. People always ask me, okay, I should be buying, but should I wait for the market to go down anymore? And the harsh reality is you need to be looking at real estate as a long-term perspective. And the one saying that I've used recently is I want to stop the notion of day trading real estate because it's a fool's errand. The reason why I'm giving you my best guess, but not, a solid prediction is because we don't know what's going to happen to the real estate market. We can see prices rise this year. We can see them fall. We can see them stay flat. With that being said, the important thing to consider is since the 90s, we've seen real estate prices follow a long-term trend of prices going up on the long term. So the people who bought real estate in 94, for example, over here, and then their prices stayed a little bit down, but they stayed relatively flat until 99. They may have said, oh, I bought on this property too high, or I spent too much money on the property. While if they held on to that property today, that same property is 4 times, maybe 4.5 times the price point that they bought it for because they had a long-term perspective to hold. And a lot of people, when I say, if you're going to buy a property for 1 to 2 years, there's not enough time to build up equity where you can hold on to that property versus if you're buying for 3+ years, I say 3+years, it's closer to 4 or 5 years is the number I typically tell people. If you're looking long term, you can build equity through the mortgage payments that you're using, and you're going to see appreciation long term. So right now, we're in a bit of an uncertain market where prices have been flat for many years, and we've seen some recent declines. With that being said, timing the market is frankly impossible and has gotten a lot of people in trouble. So what I always recommend people to do is we shop for a home fit. Can we find a home that fits your family's needs? Does it have good schools? Is it a good commute? Is it by the area you want to be in? Can you see yourself in this area long term? A great example I'll use, the example I made, I laughed about. I bought my condo when I was 25, and I picked a building and a floor plan that I thought to myself, I could live here for 5 years. And I'm extremely comfortable with that purchase to the point where if the prices went down, that's totally okay because if you look at long term, I'm very confident in these things. And I think you need to shop for it is always the right time to buy the right home, is what I like to say. And I always stay away from timing the market, but look for property fit first, is what I typically tell people when analyzing the market. I'll get to these questions very shortly. I'm just going to go over 2 more slides and then we'll have some fun. Build your team for success. And we'll watch you almost at 45 minutes, which is perfect. Let's say you guys were like, okay, I'm ready to buy a home. Like I'm 6 months to a few months away from actually making this purchase. There's 4 people I want on your team. Number one is a handsome and lovely real estate agent like this guy over here. I'd love to have the opportunity to work with you. But no matter what, you need to find a real estate agent that fits your goals. Number 2, you want a mortgage broker who is going to get you the best bang for your buck rate-wise. And frankly, is probably going to save you the most amount of money on your home. I'm typically being told that my mortgage broker is a lifesaver because of how on top of people's finances he is. Even after you purchase the property, he has your best interest at heart. Number three is a real estate lawyer. You're going to need this. There's no way around this. AI is not going to replace the lawyer just yet. You need someone to get this property from signing to close. And you want someone to, what I'll mention in a second, and you want a home inspector. A great home inspector, not a bad home inspector. I just showed a property on Tuesday, and the home inspection I got was 4 pages long. That home inspection was not done properly versus my home inspections by the person that I typically recommend is 70 pages long and is very detailed and is educational and is there to help you and provide value as a first-time buyer. All this to say, you need these 4 people, but they're not all created equal. You want people that you can trust. What does that mean? You want people who are competent, people who have knowledge, skills, and experience, people who have done this before, who know how to negotiate and know how to compare properties, and have the experience to go through it. There's one question really early on in the webinar I got. Are you working as a full-time realtor? How many deals have you closed last year? I'm excited to say that I do this full-time. I do webinars at night, but I transact and help people through the rest of the day. I'm happy to say that I was in the number 4 in my office in closed units, and I'll get to my total amount of deals we did last year. But I was number 4 in closed volume in my office, and I'm probably ranked in the top 5% of TREB, if that means anything to you. Anyways, you want someone with experience, skills, and knowledge. You want someone who's transparent, who has your best interest at heart, who's open, honest, and it's very clear, who's dependable, where if they make promises, they're going to keep those promises, and they're going to maintain confidentiality. And then, of course, empathy. I actually care what happens with your home search. I don't want you to buy the worst house on the worst street and walk away. Like, I really do care. I'm in communication with all of my clients all the way back to 8 years ago. So that's always something really important to note. So one thing I'm really excited that we've been building over the last few years, or actually not few years, I take that back, over the last few months, is our new website at homesintoreality.ca. I mentioned I'm so focused on helping first-time buyers like you guys, where we built a website just for you. You could, of course, type in homesintoreality.ca to get that resource. But from there, you're going to see a ton of tools to help you do budgets and such. I'll show you the tool afterwards. To get the webinar recordings. This webinar recording will be on that website. Easy to use tools and calculators, weekly blogs on what's happening, FAQs, and much more. I almost forgot. A good example of a blog was yesterday, the Ontario government announced the HST rebate for new homes in Toronto, which we're going to talk about it shortly. Once it came out, we wrote a blog, we put it up there. So we always have new content coming out there, similar to I have weekly videos talking about the same stuff. We put a weekly video about the HST rebate. To the question early on, how many deals did you close last year? We are at, let me do math in my head, 11 plus 45. We did 56 families we helped in 2025. And I hope to help even more in 2026. I hope that answers your question. Again, you could follow me at Gabriele Battista if you want to learn more about the stuff that we do on a weekly basis. And of course, we'll go into some Q&A. The first question I want to answer is about the HST rebate that came up yesterday. This is in combination of the GST and HST rebate that have been talked about for first homes. And this kind of goes, I'm kind of talking about a couple of questions at once. So forgive me if you want me to follow up on certain questions, you let me know. And also for everyone who is joined a little bit later, at the very bottom of your screen, there is a section where you can ask Q&A questions. They're all confidential. I see them. I will answer them as we go along. So the next 15 minutes, 10 minutes, for however long as you guys want to keep me here, I will answer those questions. So if you want to ask questions, do so in the chat there or in the Q&A section. The first question okay, we have the right stuff. What's going on with the GST and the HST rebate? So this is something that I want to give some clarity to. It was announced by the federal government that up to $1 million, you can get up to $50,000 in a GST rebate on a brand new construction. That only applies to brand new construction, and it applies to, you have to be a first-time buyer for that, which is good. Now, what was additionally announced yesterday was the HST rebate. The HST rebate is the full 13% For number one, a first-time buyer will get rebated that full amount. If you're not a first-time buyer, you do get some rebate back as well. There's still a benefit to you guys. So why is this important to give a caveat to? This is not a check in the mail you're going to get. You buy a new home, you're going to get $50,000. It's not how it works. This is a tax deduction. So whenever you buy a brand new building or a brand new condo, brand new townhouse, brand new home, there's HST to pay on that. Resale, HST is already baked into the price. You're paying it if you're paying for a $600,000 house or a $600,000 condo, it just is $600,000. That's it. When you're buying a brand new building, you pay the purchase price plus HST on that. Now, what they're saying is for a year, they're going to rebate back that money towards you, whatever the HST is. The problem I have with it and why I put a little bit of cold water on it is pre-construction historically has been close to 20+% more expensive than resale. So if you're going to buy the same property today, it is more expensive on the pre-construction side than it is if it's already built today. And it's by a big margin. Now, the good news, the fact that we're going to get a 13% HST rebate, it makes this equation a bit more attainable in the sense that you can now get the gap becomes smaller. They still need to charge more money because the cost to build is so high, but the gap does get smaller. And for some people, they'll pay a little bit extra money for a brand new property. No one's ever lived in it. You get Terry on warranty and you get a modern look and feel. So some people will pay extra money for that. But as of today, new construction is still more expensive. And this rebate will only be as effective as builders are in bringing down their prices. In my opinion, I work a ton of first-time buyers. If there are, what's the word for it? If pre-construction properties are still 30% more expensive than resale, people are going to go towards resale. If they're 20% more expensive, I still think people are going to go towards resale. If they are 15% more expensive, I think there's an argument to be made to go to new construction, depending on your situation. People in Toronto may not be able to take advantage of this unless they buy condos. But if you want a house, you have to go outside of Toronto, if that makes any sense. The next question here, I'm debating between a pre-con versus resale as a first-time home buyer. I heard horror stories on both sides. My budget is around 800-900 detached within a commutable distance from downtown. Must-haves near good school neighborhoods. If I'm looking to purchase within the next 6-7 months, do you recommend pre-con versus resale? Do you have any pre-con inventory within GTA? So the problem is pre-con inventory, to get a detached home, you're likely going to be looking outside of the GTA. You're going to be looking at pockets like Brantford, Bradford, Tottenham, Bolton, areas outside of the immediate Toronto area. And if you're saying commutable distance from downtown, I recommend resale for a couple reasons. I think of pockets like North York, where you can get a freehold property for $900,000, and there's still subway lines. You have the new LRT line on Finch. You have the new Eglinton LRT as well, where you can then be commutable. And if you're talking, you want to be in your next property within 6-7 months, it's going to be ready for you in 6-7 months. Versus pre-construction, there still is a period of waiting. I had a client have to wait 4 years for a condo and 2 years for a freehold property. So there is still a waiting aspect to consider, which is why, like, I would tell you, hey, book on my screen over here, book a call with me. I'd be happy to walk you through exactly what I'm looking at. But I think for most people's situations, resale probably makes more sense if you're looking, and this is why it's so situational, because you mentioned what's best for my family. I'm assuming there's a family near good schools, which is why I think that. So if it's what's best for your family, for some families, the best thing to do is to go north and get a bigger house because you don't need to commute. But for some families, they need to live downtown because of lifestyle, or they need to live here, or they need to live there. So it is so situational. And from there, like, I would just tell you, I would go through number one, these questions together. And then I would ask you, like, what's your work lifestyle? What's your kids' lifestyle? What's the goal? What do you want your life to look like? And from there, I can get a pretty good idea of what pockets you should be looking at. So I would tell you, no pressure. You can book a call with me. I think it's something you would get a lot of value from. Again, like I've invited a lot of people from my condo to attend this webinar, for example. Um, and excuse me, I've invited my whole building to this webinar. So we have a lot of people. Hi everyone at my building. But so they live in a really good building that I'm biased about. I really love this building. And for me, I'm a young professional who I spend a lot of time working. With that being said, for me, this made a lot of sense because it's commutable. It's near the 400, it's near 401. So a condo like this made a lot of sense. So it is such a situational conversation. If I'm unable to get any time slot from your calendar link, do you offer calls after 5 p.m. or weekends? Yes, definitely. What you're going to do, if you can, text me at the number on the bottom of the side of the screen. I don't know how to do this on this side, I think. And I'll set up a time for us to chat further. I can do a few time slots in the weekend, but I do a lot of showings in the weekends. Or we can do after 5 p.m. So we'll for sure find a time slot for you to chat more about your goals. What else we got going on here? Um, Land transfer tax rebate. If my wife has already bought a home, but I have not bought a home, do I get the rebate? Good question. The answer is no. Um, One question to consider with that is because one person has used it, you have to, and at that point, a matrimonial home, you won't qualify for that rebate. But if the math does change, let's say, for example, you're a young person and your family's helping you with the purchase, and let's say your father's going to be someone helping you with a down payment. If they're going to be a 1% owner on the property and the first time buyer is going to be a 99% owner, at that point, you would get 99% of the rebate and you would lose 1% of it. It's a great question. And leading from that question is the next one in the chat in the Q&A. How can my parents help me with a purchase? And it's a good question. There's two ways I find that makes sense to do. Number one, if they are a immediate family, they can gift you money. A gifting money basically means it's non-refundable. So they're saying, "Hey, son, here is X amount of thousands of dollars. This is for you. I do not want it back." And then in that case, the banks recognize that as a chunk of change that can help you, and it's structured as a gift. If you want to do it where you're a partner with a parent, which I usually recommend because you know what? If your parents are helping you out, they deserve some stake in the game as well. Um, I always say have them as a 1% donor, where, God forbid, if you're not here anymore and something happens, they can still fulfill the obligations of the mortgage and such, and own the property as well. I hope I answered a ton of questions here. If there's any more questions, I'm gonna give you guys 2 more seconds, a few more minutes to ask them, and then we'll wrap them up. And I might even show you some of my stats and some of my the websites I was talking about for things you can utilize. Okay, let's get to. I've got to change screens, which is always kind of funky. Or can I do this? I think this works. Where are we? Let's look at the screen. Up, you can see. Okay. So this was the website I was referring to. It is your home as a first-time buyer for a ton of things when it comes to whether it's calculators and such. There's lots of ways you can go about it. I have to zoom back in. So there's a couple of things I always recommend people to do. Some things are works in progresses, but if you want to summarize what we talked about today and you wanted to read about some things that you must do in terms of the process, you can summarize that through all of these lovely steps over here. The other thing that we want to talk about is things like tools. The first home buyer tool, where you can, let's say you want to buy, in this situation that was mentioned, a $900,000 condo. We have your minimum down payment. We have your 20% down payment, land transfer tax. You can mess around with the emergency fund that fits your situation. And once you are done with it, you can download the PDF and it will look something like this, where you can go through and print out all the stuff you want. and of course, make a proper budget. That's really the goal of that tool is. And we're always making new changes to help first-time buyers. And if there's anything you think that is best to or you want to be added, I am happy to do our best to create one. $900,000 again. Let's see what for $1 million. Let's do this. Here's all the closing costs to consider. Some are a little bit different, but there's tons of tools to help you. There's a rent versus buy calculator that goes over the amount of money in equity versus what you'd be paying in renting. Um, we mentioned the blog before. We have constant blogs talking about market updates, my opinion on the markets, where I see prices going, all that fun stuff. We post something every week here. And then our webinar recordings are all over here as well. This is what we did 2 weeks ago, and this next one likely will be here as well. And yeah, again, we do these every single month. If you did want to book an appointment, you can either book with myself or you can book with Sergey Modilewski, who is my mortgage partner. He is the person who honestly is my lifesaver, and you're going to get a ton of great insights from working with Sergey. So, or you can book a call with all of us. But that is the bulk of it. I'll stick around. I don't see any more questions, but I won't pressure anyone to ask them. Um, yeah, I won't. I will wait around. If there's any more questions, I'm happy to stick around. Otherwise, thank you for spending some time with me this evening. An hour of me talking and you guys listening is a lot, so I definitely understand. Um, I'm I generally care about your home search and what that looks like. So if there's anything that you think I can do to help you get in the right direction, I'd be more than happy to discuss further. No obligation. I have calls like this all the time. So, anyways, thank you everyone for joining. I'm gonna wait another 2 minutes, then we're gonna head out of here. But I see there's a bunch of people still on, so maybe there's more questions. I'll stick around for another 2 minutes, and then we're gonna get going. Again, the Q&A is in the very bottom, but I think it looks like we're all out of questions, which is totally okay. Let's see. Yep, that looks like it's all of it. Everyone, thank you so much for coming out to the first home for next generation homeowners. I think this is going to be a great start to something awesome for what you're doing. Hopefully, we can help you buy your very first home, whether it's today, tomorrow, next year, next week, in 2027. Who cares? I'm looking forward to helping you guys with that home search. Enjoy the rest of your evening, and I look forward to talking to all of you guys. Take care.